Alright guys, welcome to the Wednesday directions video. Today we have notes, so we're going to go through the notes here. 10 slides. Pretty important day though. We have a bunch of essential questions. You can see they're kind of behind me, so I'll just read them off for you guys. Here are the questions that come from these notes today that'll end up on our quiz. So the first question is which powers were granted to Congress? Which powers were not granted to Congress? What were the two accomplishments achieved by the Articles of Confederation? And what was America's first attempt at organizing a government? And the answer to number 4, what was our first attempt at organizing the government? We decided to come up with this thing called the Articles of Confederation. Kind of our first try. Eventually, we'll scrap these and we'll create the Constitution. But this is before the Constitution. This is our first try. The Constitution is actually pretty good. And it's because we failed so miserably with the Articles of Confederation that we had to scrap it, try again. And we took a little more time and saw the mistakes of the articles and fixed them. So let's just dive in here, and I'll highlight the essential questions as we go. So first slide. So the Articles of Confederation. During the Revolution, the new United States needed a functional government modeled after colonial governments. States would retain sovereignty. Founders were fearful of contrary power due to the past experience with Britain. Basically just saying we needed to form a government and we needed to form it fast during the Revolution. All that a lot of these people knew was their local governments and how your local governments were structured. So they kind of just modeled it after colonial governments, which work pretty good on a small scale, but don't really work so well on a large scale, such as being like, trying to run an entire nation, a little bit harder than trying to run, the colony of New Jersey, which would be tiny. All right. States would retain their sovereignty, so each state would still have their individual freedoms, very similar to what we have today. And founders were fearful of contrary power due to the past experience of Britain. So the Articles of Confederation, the big knock on it is that it was too weak. The central government or the national government didn't have enough power to do anything. And that makes sense because, during that time, we just got done fighting a war to make sure we didn't have a strong national government or a king. So it makes sense that we would make them weak. So let's kind of look at that part. So the whole idea of this, we were not really going to become one big nation officially. Well, we were, I guess, but the idea was for the Articles of Confederation that they were going to establish a firm league of friendship among the states. So the states were not going to be totally on the same page. We're just going to be kind of working with each other. So it's a little bit different. We had the announcements come on. So the states were just going to become a firm league of friendships. We're going to kind of work with each other. Bills were passed on 9 of 13 votes. So if you're going to pass a bill, you need 9 of 13 votes. And if you wanted to maybe adjust or change the Articles of Confederation, you would need a unanimous vote. You would need all 13 states to make changes to the Articles of Confederation. So basically, if you wanted to change the government structure at all, you'd have all the states vote yes. Now, that may be difficult because people recognize some weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation early, but they weren't able to adjust or change or fix the Articles because they can never get 13 states to all vote yes. So the Articles kind of just stayed being kind of crappy and not working to its full potential because there's always 1 or 2 states that if they would make this change, it would hurt their state a little bit, so they would just veto it or say no. All right, so that's kind of where we're at with the limited government. It was more power shifting towards the states. So states' power really high, national government power pretty low. All right, so the structure is pretty simple. We have a unicameral, or just a single house legislative body, where now we have the House of Representatives and the Senate. Back then it would just be like the Senate or just the House. We only had the one legislative body. That word is called unicameral, or single house. All right, each state would have 1 vote, regardless of population size. So tiny New Jersey would have 1 vote, and so would a massive colony or massive state like Virginia. Congress given sole authority to govern the country. So again, Congress does have that sole authority that we were kind of talking about yesterday. An executive committee oversaw government when Congress was not in session. Congress would establish temporary courts to hear disputes among states. So that's one thing here, this one. The states were not all on good terms. There was a lot of disputes between states. And at one point, we're about to have, for example, New York declare war on New Jersey. Like, we're about to have states go to war with each other. So having these courts set up to kind of be a mediator between the disputes was probably a good idea. But again, that's as much as Congress was allowed to do according to the articles. They weren't able to step in or help or anything like that. So this is the important one. These are the powers allowed or powers granted to the Articles of Confederation. This is one of our essential questions. So it's going to be on the quiz. So make sure you jot all these down. Here's what basically the federal government was allowed to do. First one, declare war and make peace. And then off of that, make treaties with foreign countries. They could establish an army and navy. They could appoint high-ranking military officials. So, the national government basically got to pick the leaders of the army, create the army, and then obviously outfit the army. They could print and borrow money. They could establish weights and measures. And again, hear disputes among the states related to trade or boundaries. Again, if we think about the colonies, right, it's just all on the East Coast, or the states are all on the East Coast. And the question was, well, who gets all the land out west? Anything west of like the Appalachian Mountains. And it just turns out that every single state just declared that they had claim to all the land. So all the states thought that they should have all the land. So obviously that's going to lead to some more disputes and squabbles that Congress would have to hear in those mediator courts. All right, so this is what they can do. Again, it's not a lot of stuff. And here's like the stuff that they could not do. All right, so remember, they could raise an army and a navy, but they had no power to raise the funds for the army and navy. So, you wouldn't be able to buy equipment for your soldiers. You wouldn't be able to pay your soldiers, a.k.a. you can't really have an army if you can't pay anybody to fight for you. All right, so again, this is one of those weaknesses. They say you can establish an army, but you can't pay for it. Now, you couldn't really pay for it because you had no power to tax. Okay, you couldn't impose tariffs and you couldn't collect duties. So the national government had no way of making money. Okay, there's no taxes. All right, so everything that the national government uses that tax money for was not around. Okay, for example, raise an army, roads, public schools, public anything, public libraries, the post office, whatever it is that the government has their hands into. Back then, they did not. Right, there was no taxes, so there was no safety net. Let's say you lost your job, there was nothing there for it to help you. You just ended up not even in the poorhouse. You probably just ended up dead. There was no executive branch to enforce laws, so every laws they made, they would just make the law, but they had no power to enforce the law. It'd be kind of like if I just put speed limit signs up everywhere, but everyone knew there was no cops. Well, probably no one's going to follow the speed limit signs. So that's kind of what happened here. No power to control trade among the states. No power to force states to honor obligations. No power to regulate the value of currency. So, we had big time influx of money. Like, the currency value would fluctuate crazy. One day you go buy a gallon of, like modern times, if you go buy a gallon of milk, $2. Next day you go there, it's $5. Next day you go there, it's 50 cents. So it was really fluctuating, which is obviously not good for your national economy. The no power to force states to honor obligations has to go with the taxes. If the federal government cannot afford stuff, they would ask the states for money, and the money in the states would say yes sometimes, but then they just would never end up paying it. And a lot of times the states just said no. So that's another obvious glaring issue when your national government has no money to do anything, not even raise an army to defend yourself. All right, let's move on here. There are 3 major accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation. We want to know all 3, so jot these down. The first one, obviously, we won the Revolutionary War under the Articles of Confederation, which is good, obviously. This was the federal government. They negotiated the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Obviously, really important thing. First time our country had to negotiate a nationwide peace. And the last one here is called the Established the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And that's basically right here. It's just laying out what's going to happen in this territory up here. What are we going to do with it? How is it going to be split up? And we're going to look at the Northwest Ordinances more tomorrow. All right. But yeah, just saying, or just laying out here. What are we going to do with all this land? And then obviously they come up with a plan, and the plan's pretty good. All right. So that is one more accomplishment. And again, we'll know more about that tomorrow. So let's jot these three down. These three will all make our quiz. All right, problems facing the new nation. We had trade with foreign nations. Obviously, we couldn't impose tariffs. The government, the national government, didn't really have a lot of power to do anything with anybody. They couldn't really stop the states from fighting each other. They couldn't really go out and negotiate with other countries because of, they just didn't have the power to do that at the moment. All right. Foreign relations, obviously. Financing the nation, we couldn't tax it. Taxes is like the 90% of how the national government or any government makes their money is on taxes. And without it, basically the national government was helpless. They had some powers, but they had no money to even do it. And then obviously the interstate relations. To put it bluntly, in this moment, every state kind of hated each other. I would say the state-v-state relations was horrible. Horrible. Again, if we're having states about to declare war on each other, that should give you a little bit of an idea of where we're sitting here as a state-v-state interrelations here. Problem with trade, we were no longer the favorite trading partner of Great Britain. If we want to export to British ports, they had to be on British ships, aka we had to pay the British shipping fee. Many U.S.-produced goods were barred from British ports. Britain sent vast amounts of cheap goods to the United States, again, to try to flood the market with cheap goods. So if you were going to buy American-made products, they would be more expensive. Thus, the consumer would always never buy them, right? A potential remedy for that would be to establish a tariff on British goods. Basically, you put a special tax on British goods to make them, if America's prices are here and the British prices are here, we could put a tariff or a special tax to raise the prices. And a lot of times you make it more expensive so then people will buy the American-made good. But we could not do that in this case because the national government didn't have the power to create tariffs. So basically, Britain just kind of destroyed our economy by flooding it, with cheap goods. Again, just showcasing another poor display of strength by the Articles of Confederation. Again, they wanted to have a really weak government, and they definitely accomplished that with the Articles of Confederation, but they actually made the national government too weak to be sustainable, and that's why we had to scrap them. All right? This is for the kids in class today. If you want to just kind of take a moment and reflect on how you would fix these problems, these 4 issues, you don't have to write anything down or anything like that. Just kind of think about it and kind of reflect for a little bit on these 4. How would you help solve these issues? And then we're done for today. So that's it. No other assignment, just the notes today. And tomorrow, like I said, we'll have a little reading assignment on the Northwest Ordinances, which is one of the major accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation. But all right, guys, have a good day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow.